Welcome inside a special edition of the Scores Table. Brian Haenchen, Danny Riego with you. We're in about 2 hours removed from the finish, a wild finish between Lawrence Central, Lawrence North in the Marion County quarterfinals. Final score was 57-55. Lawrence Central led by 9 early in the second half, fell behind by 7 with about 2 minutes left, then stormed back to win it. A couple back-to-back buckets late. Jayla Lampley and then Layla Abdurakib scores with 12 seconds left to give them the lead. Big win for Lawrence Central. I don't think you can really overstate the importance. I guess you can, but not really at this point in the season. For Lawrence Central, it felt like a growing-up game. Lawrence North, I'm not sure what to learn. But, Danny, I'll throw it to you and just your initial thoughts on that game.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. And very rarely do those matchups live up, unless it's LCLN. I feel like every time these two teams play, it gives us something else to talk about. I'll point out that Josh, when we previewed this basketball game in the podcast, in the first episode of the Scores Table, said that in Sagarin, it mathematically spit out that LC was going to be a 2-point favorite, and they fell right on that 2 points. And so really, really fun matchup. But we learned a lot about LC, learned a lot about LN. And I'm sure we'll talk about that here.
I forgot about that, about Josh going with calling it precisely at the 2-point difference. I think the official prediction, I think we texted about it. It was a little more skewed just based off the computer rankings, but Josh nailed it. So we tip our cap to Josh. Let's start at the beginning. And for it felt like they were kind of feeling each other out to an extent. I don't know. And in the offense, it was very much an offensive slog for both sides. But defensively for Lawrence North, something that I wrote down, they were causing a lot of problems with their pressure, and that was kind of a precursor for what happened later. And then for Lawrence Central, I was kind of surprised / impressed with their size inside kind of causing issues for Lawrence North, especially on the glass there in the first quarter in particular.
Well, what it looked like, it looked like whether it was something they learned in scouts or just something that, because it didn't seem like it was what they always do, but they made it a point to throw it into the block. And I thought they were going to get some I think they thought they were going to get some opportunities with Thomas and Franklin against the size, particularly if Lola was guarding somebody on the perimeter, which she was, and that's where she's best anyways. But they weren't productive down there. So that was, you're right. And outside of just the two kind of heavyweights, just kind of pacing back and forth with each other, throwing in an occasional jab, neither of them really threw haymakers really early, and they were kind of feeling it out.
Yeah, and then with Lawrence Central, and I brought this up with Jadam when we talked afterwards, but it seemed like Jayla Lampley was the one to set the tone for them physically inside. There was a sequence there, I think it was in the first quarter, when it was just her surrounded by 3 or 4 Lawrence North players battling for a rebound, and it's Jayla reaching up, a big girl play, reaching up for that ball, battling by herself underneath the basket for a rebound, and that really, from that moment on, I think the ball got knocked out of bounds. And then, a minute or so later, Jayla got the shot and knocked in the bucket. But overall, the tone that it set, because from that point on, it really felt like Lawrence Central kind of went to work inside. And it's like her teammates started then to battle for those rebounds inside. It kind of, again, set the tone physically in terms of establishing that physicality for Lawrence Central in the paint.
Yeah, and I think Jayla was great all basketball game. She was clearly the focal point of the Lawrence North defense. I thought she did a great job, but I think early Lola Lampley really showed us a lot. And I think with Lola was so good tonight. And I think you can statistically look at it and say, oh, you might be underwhelmed by the 8 points per game. But anybody that knows her skill set or really knows basketball, I think it's really easy to see that her effect on a basketball game isn't statistically measured. But tonight, she gave statistics to back it up. I thought her scoring ability was really on display tonight. And she hit the 2 early threes, and being very familiar with her game, when she hits an early 3, it's really difficult because you have to close that gap. And now she has driving lanes, and very rarely does Lola Lampley not make the right decision when she's able to get into gaps and get downhill. And I thought tonight, when she hit those early threes, it's no wonder that she had a game high 20. She was so good tonight, and I thought she was the best player on the floor.
Coming into the week, I had to look this up during the game, but coming into the week, Lola had been limited to 6 points over her past 3 games, including an 0 for 9 showing with 0 points against Royal Kentucky. She comes back with 9 points in the first half, huge in getting them going. And then she had some big shots down the stretch. I know Layla and Jayla took over late and got them, won the game for them. But Lola was critical in getting to that point. And like you said, I mean, for her to do that, and that's something that Jinan, Lawrence Central's coach, talked about, is just Lola learning, as young players do, how to accept that responsibility and that accountability of being the player that your teammates are looking to produce for you guys. And she's done that. And then this week, the Franklin Central game on Tuesday and the game tonight kind of just shows and is another step in that young player's progression, which is really exciting to see from such a highly touted player.
Well, as we break down LC, look at the names that keep coming up. Jayla Lampley, Layla Durkreek, Lola Lampley. I mean, I was dead wrong that this was going to be an X Factor game. This was about the stars tonight. Mm-hmm. And I thought those three, look, you talked about the big steal, which won the basketball game at 57-55, but she also had the and one, which cut the lead to 2. And then back at, it was probably just under 3 minutes. The lead was 52-45. I think they traded a couple of empty possessions, and then Layla hits a 3, which at that point in time, it looked like it was going to be LN. And, it looked like they just had control of the basketball game, and Layla hits a really big 3. Those are really big plays. But I thought that in the end, I thought the big 3, particularly Jayla and Lola, I think they were just able to get into the paint. They were able to get to their spots. Every time you looked up, one of them was in the paint or they were in a gap helping a help defender. I think Lola assisted Layla on that 3 that she hit at 52-55. I think that was an assist from Lola because she penetrated middle, drew her defender, kicked. It's easy basketball, and Layla's so good that she's going to make that shot, and she does. But their big 3 was fantastic tonight.
Yeah. And Anaya McKenzie too made some big plays. It kind of went under the radar, but she made some big plays defensively. 30-28. I think the score was tied at 28 when Anaya McKenzie gets a steal, and then she had this like fancy pass over to Lola, and Lola has this little like spinning layup thing that she hits where it almost looks like throwing it over her back. But I guess it's just a way to get around a defender. She did that on back-to-back plays, if memory serves, to keep them in into the third quarter.
And she was pinned on the block late too in a very critical possession where Jemiah Thomas hits Anaya with a spin move, but she kind of contests it high, forces a miss there. They get a weak side rebound, and I think they come down and get an and one with Jayla there. I think in that instance, it might have been Layla, one of the two, but that was a big turning point in the game too. But you're right, it started with Anaya McKenzie's defense on Jemiah Thomas on the block.
And what's crazy, and the thing that stood out to me immediately was that that felt so familiar to last year's sectional game against Lawrence Central, where Lawrence Central was in it, they were battling, and it was just Jayla Lampley carrying the team. This year, not only was it a big 3 effort and kind of like that growing up game, but just as a team, the way they responded in that moment and to come through like that, it's fun to see as somebody who covers these teams. You get to see that progression over the course of however many months it's been since February. Math is
That's
hard.
Right.
Or 10 months later, you get to see that progression and how far they've come. And I wrote it in my story, but a year ago, they don't win this game, and even a week ago, they didn't win in this spot. They lost to Riego, Kentucky, where they were up, I think, 10 at one point. They led most of the way, and they let a lead slip away late. And Janan said, they just didn't, it just didn't come through. But it's a learning experience, and now you see that experience starting to pay off, and a huge win for a program that's been trending in the right direction now for a few years.
Yeah, telepathically, that's exactly what I was going to say. They actually play the George Rogers Clark game was the one where they blew the lead, and I couldn't find film on it. I couldn't see it, but I knew some people in the gym that were kind of texting me throughout. And then afterwards they said LN was just better all basketball game, but they didn't close. And that's why I think tonight shows, how connected that team is and how that locker room must be, because they came back the same day against a very good Ryle basketball team, and I think beat them going away. I mean, a text I got was like, I think it gave the score and then it said, but it wasn't even that close really. And then tonight, the last 3 minutes of that basketball game, LC was they just stayed with it, and they just stayed with their identity, and it was really impressive. So yeah, you're starting to stack some things up on a positive side now for LC.
Let's talk about LN. A lot of different ways. I think I'll let you pick where we go for this one. I took lead on LC. I'll let you take lead with LN.
Look, don't sell your LN stock. Okay. It's still a very bullish stock in defeat.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the positive way that you can spin this is they led 55-48 with a minute 20 left. Okay. They had a great second half. They actually had another 7-point lead at about 3 minutes left. Okay. One big positive that I draw away from LN was Kamara Mills. I think the one thing we learned about the matchup between Lawrence North and Lawrence Central, or one question that existed going into it, is can LN score with LC? And I think what we found out is the answer is no, unless Kamara Mills gets some volume. And I think I was sitting next to Josh during the basketball game, and she very unassumingly and uninterestingly steps to the line with 7 minutes left after scoring just 2 points in the first half. With 7 minutes left in the third quarter, I tapped Josh and I said, mark this point in the game down.
No
These
way.
might be the 2 free throws that get Kamara Mills going, and she goes on to have a 14-point half. It's incredible how gifted and remarkable that kid is on the offensive side of the floor. She needed to get a little bit of help. I thought she made great plays down the stretch, but Kamara Mills in defeat tonight, I think, emerged as a big star. And it just took a couple of free throws to get her going. But obviously, right, Hank, I mean, the headline is their inability to handle the pressure defense of LC. And I think Steven is they're going to have to study the film. I think, maybe it ends up being some ball fakes. Maybe it ends up that they weren't spread or rotating the way that they wanted to offensively. Maybe they didn't maintain aggression once they got past the first level of defense. I thought they missed some diagonal and downs. I think I call them diagonal downs. So when you have the ball in one corner, there should only be one defender on the weak side, and you can throw the ball diagonal, and then you have another down pass. You get a good shot that way. I thought they missed a couple of those, but in the end, I think their inability to handle that pressure probably is what got them, but they will learn from it because all of that stuff is on film, and they drilled it, and they're fine, and there's championship medal there, and I can guarantee you Steven has already got that team looking forward. But don't sell your LN stock. I think it's still strong as ever.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that about going back to your first point about Kamara Mills. It's funny you bring that up because in my notes, I remember watching that play, and I made a note of it as I was following it and put a couple asterisks next to it. So it's like, here's kind of where that turning point is. It's a senior making big plays in a moment when her team needs it. And then if you remember on that shot, the shot that she took, that thing blipped out. Like it was close to going down for a 3-point play. But
yes, it was.
And then she had 6 straight points. It was only a 6-3 run, but that was kind of the turning point when LN got some life breathed into them. With respect to the turnovers, absolutely. I think that's what ultimately cost LN. But before we get to that, there were some opportunities there where Lawrence North had a steal. I neglected to write down the exact moment, but LN got a steal late. I think a chance to go up maybe 10, and they just missed the shot. Like it was a bunny shot, and they missed it. That kind of left the door open for LC, and even though it didn't happen immediately, it's like, okay, now it's open, and it's going to be really tough for LN to rebuild that lead just, with how LC played. It's one of those sliding door moments, I guess, where if you hit that shot there, I think the game takes on a little different complexion. If you get that lead up to double digits, I don't know if LC responded quite the same way. Maybe that's kind of like the backbreaker, but they didn't credit LC for capitalizing. We'd be remiss, too, if we didn't talk about that sequence at the end of the third quarter, which was batty.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely batty, where it was a tied game, right, when Lawrence Central, and it looked like worst case scenario they're down 2, and instead it was a Butler layup, and then Kamara Mills jumps in and forces a steal, lays it in, and gives them the lead.
All within the last 3 seconds of the quarter.
That was incredible. That was absolutely incredible. And then Go ahead,
Hank. So Mills also had an opportunity with 90 seconds left. And you talk about missed opportunities. This is kind of a weird one because the run really starts at about 1:20, maybe a little bit under that, is when Mills hits the second of 2 free throws to give them their 55th point. That was about at 1:20. At 1:30, Mills has a wide open 3. I mean, a wide open 3. And this is one of the best catch and release shooters in the state. And she had a wide open 3. I think in hindsight, that's the right play for her to run an additional 10 seconds off and get to the free throws. I think they actually had one foul to give, and it ended up they had to get the ball back in bounds. But Mills was in rhythm. I think she had things going a little bit. At 90 seconds, she catches that basketball to 7-point lead. That's another one of those opportunities that would have made a 10-point basketball game with 80 seconds left. And that really would have swung the basketball game too. And I'm not being critical of Kamara. She made the right play. It's just in defeat, you have to unpack some of these things unpleasantly.
Yeah, and I mean it's little moments like that. They don't fully decide the game, but they loom large when you lose, and they loom big the other way. Obviously, when you win. With respect to the turnovers, I asked Stephen Thomas about that, and he brought up the fact that they lost a couple of their big ball handlers from last year with Monica and then Lanaya early as well. Two seniors who've been around the block are used to playing in those situations. So for as much experience as LN brings back, and some that we talked about actually last show, with just how will these teams respond in these different situations. For LN, it's still going to be a process. And the way that LC's defense tilted that game late was surprising. I wasn't expecting that. And two, I was equally surprised with how well LC adjusted to LN's press as the half progressed. Were they able to minimize the turnovers on the inbounds just enough to keep them alive in that game?
Yeah, you talk about the pressure defense. Josh talked about. He was talking about, we'll see how Jennings County has to handle this pressure, and Center Grove and Franklin and Bedford North Lawrence and some of these other schools now that are in the South. In just watching how long it truly is, it really does look like there's 6 of them out there. And when they get their hands up, it is very difficult to even throw a ball reversal against it. They run it really well. And we knew that was kind of the pressure defense was the identity of their basketball team going into it. But against a really good basketball team, to show that kind of effectiveness with it, they're getting really good at it.
Steven had them with 20 turnovers. Lawrence North, that is, he had them down with 20 turnovers. So yeah, tells you what kind of night it was. It was tough, and a lot of them came in crucial situations, including on that last possession where I'm not sure if everybody knew how much time was left, and then LN just kind of got trapped on the sideline and didn't even get a shot off. They just got swarmed and gobbled up into the trap.
Well, there was a deflection by Lola. It goes back to my point where the star of that game was Lola Lampley. It's very apropos that it ends with a deflection of Lola and in something that isn't statistically measured. I mean, we talk about deflections all the time, and a lot of teams now chart deflections, but that's not, you don't get 10 deflections and get credit for a double-double if you have 10 and 10 deflections, even though you probably should now at this point in time. But that's a deflection, doesn't show up in the stats, and it's the biggest play of the basketball game defensively for Lawrence Central.
Yep. Something, too, that's interesting about Lawrence North is that I should have asked the follow-up, but it sounded like in talking to Steven that they started installing some different things at halftime and trying some different things with that pressure. And he challenged the girls, and they embraced it and rose to the occasion. So it just goes to the inner workings. And, again, that trust factor that you and Josh have talked about as coaches, just how important it is. Again, and Courtney Delks, too, but just how important that is. And it's fascinating seeing that play out in real time and what that allows teams to do, where you're literally installing something in a single elimination format and seeing if your kids can deliver.
That's really good. They scored 13 points in the first half against that defense. So if there's a time to try something, it's when you score. It's coming off a half where you score 13 points. And it might have, I think it was 13. If my memory serves me correctly, I think Kamara Mills missed a 3 that would have made it a 5-point game. They're down 8 at the half. I mean, they just had nothing going offensively. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, you talked about some of the defensive things that they might have been trying, but they worked. But I think in the end, I thought just it looked like they were just a lot looser. I think you could tell, like Winston's body language. She started chirping a little bit, even she was just more into the basketball game. I thought that translated through a lot of those players. Mills gets the free throws and then ends up hitting a jumper 2 possessions later off of a kind of a weak side screen, catches it in the middle, hits another one, and then they just went. And then you looked up, and all of a sudden it's like 32-31. You're like, Lawrence North is winning this. Like, how are they winning the game? They had nothing going. And suddenly you look up, and it's 32-31 Wildcats.
It really felt at the end of the third quarter, I mentioned this to Steve, it felt like that was the game right there, where LN just got that little surge to take the lead. It's like, okay, veteran team, they know how to close this. But again, goes back to that same talking point that I'll probably beat relentlessly this weekend too, but just that experience factor for LC, and not even experience, just the growth factor for LC and learning to come through in those games. As we start to bring it home here, Danny, with this, LC will be heavily favored, I think, against Pike, and they're going to be heavily favored in the championship game against either Brebeuf or North Central. Assuming they win out, assuming nothing wonky happens with HSE, I think if we were just ranking the Central Indiana teams, I'd go LC 1, LN 2, HSE 3. How would you rack them? 1, 2, 3.
I'd flip HSE and LN. I think if you look, I think the second loss now Zionsville LC, the only loss coming to Columbia City for HSE. I think they've got the quality win against Noblesville on the road when Avery Gordon was healthy at Brownsburg. Have won in kind of style points and maybe a little bit more impressive fashion. The other night they were able to withstand Casey Werfel's 40-piece nugget that she put on them. To get another W there. We'll talk about that next week when we do our second episode of the scores table. But LC right now and arguably is going to be the number one team in the area. I would give HSE the nod at 2, and then I would drop LN. Again, I'm buying all 3 of their stocks.
Make picks for Saturday in the county semifinals.
So, Look, I love what Keith Hollins is doing. It's just I know he's got some really, really good kids in the junior high system. It's not going to be long before that's a real discussion there between Lawrence Central and Pike, but I think I'm going to ride the momentum and the talent of Lawrence Central into that basketball game with Pike. And I talked about CJ Walker in the episode prior in looking at North Central. And I know Brebeuf really this is a great year for them. They've really, really improved. But I think the ability of CJ Walker to put in a one-day game plan, executed in practice or implemented in practice and executed on game. I think they have some senior leaders. So I think, and again, if I'm wrong, then tweet at me. But I'm going to go Lawrence Central versus North Central for the championship on December 9th.
Well, as a graduate of St. Louis University, which is a Jesuit institution, I think I'm actually obligated to pick Brebeuf Jesuit. But that second semifinal is going to be really interesting. Of course, Brebeuf's a little bit long than people might realize. And I'll wrap things up with this. I really love this from Stephen Thomas, and he pointed out he said, what a statement for Lawrence Township with these two teams competing at such a high level in the state of Indiana, where there's so many great girls playing basketball, and how much conversation has been about Lawrence Central and Lawrence North. And that, we talked about how excited they are to continue to promote girls basketball and just the growth. And that's something that, honestly, I hadn't really thought of it in those terms. And I don't know why, because I think, 2 weeks ago, the headline of my freaking Fab 15 was Lawrence Township schools are 1-2. But it really is, when you take a step back, remarkable. Just the growth of girls basketball. Like Lawrence North, I understand, is an established brand, but now to have Lawrence Central in there as well, it's just incredible. And it's such like a watershed moment, I guess is what you call it for that township, to have these two girls basketball teams competing for state titles. Like I watched Lawrence Central tonight for the first time. I've seen LN twice now. These are two teams that could absolutely win a state championship, and that's crazy. They're in the same township, and then the atmosphere tonight too. It's not really new. I've seen that before at Lawrence Central, but it's still, though, it hits you, and girls basketball in general, but there especially, like the amount of support. Like it was loud in there. It was really loud. I was sitting above the LC side. It was loud in there. When LM was going on their run, it was loud across the other way too, and still loud on the LC side. Like it was great to see, and it's cool. It's a really cool moment for that area of the city. And it's just getting started. That's probably the best part.
Yeah, I mean, in my section alone, I mean, we were sitting next to Chris Gunn, who's the father of CJ Gunn, who's a Lawrence North legend. His daughter Lauren Gunn was there too, and she won a state championship with Lawrence North the year they had Jayla Smith. Jayla Smith's dad was there, 2021 Miss Basketball. Sean Parrish, the father of 2020 Miss Basketball, Sydney Parrish, they were there. I mean, it was kind of a who's who out there, and it was really fun and an electric environment. And it was really cool that it was in one township and just right up the road. And anybody that missed it, go back and watch it, 'cause it's a great basketball game.
Maybe just watch the second half.
Yeah. You won't miss much.
Yeah. Yeah, that was awesome. But Danny, it was fun doing this. We thank everybody so much for watching. Will be back with everybody sometime next week. We'll have plenty to talk about, be it the county championship here. There's a lot of good games. I'll be out at some this week. I'm sure Danny will be out and active as well. But again, we thank you all so much for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.
See you.